Alright, I'm doing my vlog on the teaching social studies. The first question is, what were the lesson's objectives and what did the teacher do to help her students reach these objectives? The lesson that I observed was on the Constitution, specifically the amendments. Um, so the objectives for the lesson were for the students to learn the amendments to the Constitution. Um, Other than the Bill of Rights, that's a different lesson. How was the lesson organized? My teacher had a lecture that was assisted through the smartboard and a Prezi presentation. Um, the Prezi covered the major amendments that were going to be covered in class, and students took notes on a provided handout that was divided into each different amendment. How did the students react to the lesson? They all really liked the Prezi, so they got really into the lesson, which was a good way to start out. They also liked that when my teacher asked, she would go over the amendments, would say the actual written words of the amendment, and then would ask them to put it into their own words. And they really seemed to like that because then they started paying attention more and trying to figure out what it meant so they could answer. What did the students' notes look like? They took down notes from the Prezi on the worksheet that was provided for them. Plus, they provided the examples that my cooperating teacher gave. She gave some personal examples and things to help them remember what the different amendments were for. Would you describe the learning experience as successful? I would, because the students were able to put the amendments into their own words after the lesson. And a week later, they started a project that was an amendment video project. And most of them still remembered what amendment they were put into, what it was based on the class period. Who was it successful for? I think that it was successful for everyone. Pretty much all the students seemed to get the information down and knew what was going on, and they seemed pretty interested in the lesson, so I think that it was a fairly successful lesson. What evidence do you have to prove it was successful? At the time they took notes, so we have completed note sheets to see that they could, or they were paying attention and were taking notes down. We'll see when they turn in their presentations tomorrow, I guess, if they really did remember what we taught them and if their outside research was good too. And then at some point they'll take a test on it, so I guess we'll really find out if they learned anything then. How does the lesson resemble and or differ from some of the ideas presented in this class? We used Web 2.0 tools with the Prezi, and we used smartboard technology, which obviously very big in our class. We also had a lecture that was provided with visuals. Each one of the amendments had a picture that corresponded with it to try and help the students remember what the amendment did. So that's how it was similar to the class. It was different in that she didn't explicitly state in the objectives for the class period or anything like that. There wasn't really a following of the framework that we use when we come up with our NCSS lessons, but I think that it was just as successful even without that. And then the last question, how might you adapt this lesson yourself in the future? I would personally want to have more student involvement. I would want, and this did happen occasionally, or more than occasionally, this happened in the class, more than one student would rephrase what the amendment meant. So my cooperating teacher would say what the amendment was in the original words, and then would ask what it meant, and one student would respond, but I wouldn't mind hearing from at least two to see if there were different opinions, because there were a couple times where students clearly didn't think that that was what it was, but they just went with it because that person volunteered. Um, and this is a really good way to make sure that the students aren't just writing down what's written on the board. They understand what's being talked about in the amendment because they're putting it into their own words. So they're not just copying off the board, they're using their own prior knowledge and thinking to learn and do the lesson. So, yeah.